recording?
Yes. We can edit this bit out.
Okay. Well, generally the concerns about the environment, we have things like peak oil, climate change. These things are happening, which seems to be unsustainably.
Anything to write with, or are you okay?
I think I'm okay.
Did you want to complete the agenda there? Or?
Well, I have it more or less. We can add something to it if we need to.
So the oil is running out. We've got climate change. We've serious big problems, ahead in human society. Some people say, well, sure, when the oil runs out, sure, we've got nuclear power, we've got wind energy, we've got all these other things. It's no big deal. We'll just switch over, when the time comes. There are problems with all that. There's nothing like the cheap energy that we got from oil going to be available from any of these technologies. And I'll just go through basically the problems with all these technologies at the moment. Nuclear power is seen as an alternative to oil, energy depleting and a mitigating effect of climate change, where basically we can create more greenhouses. We can, and if the weather is bad, we can grow indoors and all that, and we can just use what energy we have to do that. But Fukushima, Chernobyl, other nuclear disasters are happening, and they'll probably happen at an increasing rate. China at the moment is doing a crash program in nuclear energy. But I'll just go through what happened to Fukushima first. The earthquake off the power to the cooling system. The following tsunami wiped out the diesel generators. There's a third line of events, which was a room full of batteries. They only lasted for a few hours. Then the option was to pump seawater into the cooling system. Now they had designed, safety, fail-safe systems, but all these systems failed because they had a failure in common, which was the earthquake. The earthquake on its own would have been fine, but then there was a tsunami afterwards, which wiped out all the other safety things. So basically what they did was pump water into the cooling system. The intense heat, evaporated the water more quickly than it could be pumped in. So they had to basically, around the fuel cell, release toxic steam into the atmosphere. Otherwise, the whole thing would have blown up, and it would have been a huge disaster, much more than it is now. So there are problems with nuclear power, especially when you have for-profit driven. You'd think Japan would be a very technologically advanced country that would have been able to solve all these problems. But when you have profit and safety systems that don't generally work, and there's quick fixes, such as Chernobyl as well, everything's all quick fixed. When there's problems, wanted to keep the money rolling in, the energy going out. So on Chernobyl, the figures vary widely as to the final death toll, but according to the U.S. National Institute of Health, found that 6,000 thyroid cancers have been recorded, and new cases continue to be recorded as a result of just Chernobyl on its own. So in a few years with Fukushima, we'll probably see something similar, massive increases in cancer. And generally around the world, we're seeing a massive increase in the number of people getting cancer. Some say it's the food, some say it's radiation, but there's definitely something happening that's causing all this. You also have other toxic contaminations like oil, Deepwater Horizon, 205 million gallons, Exxon Valdez, 11 million gallons built. In the Niger Delta, you got like the equivalent of you got 5,000 major oil spills in the Niger Delta in the last 50 years. So it's basically an Exxon Valdez disaster every year in the Niger Delta. It's not being reported on. Deepwater Horizon, it was poor regulations. You have these revolving doors where you have this mineral management service, which is supposed to be a regulator, but oil executives, they get up so high on the companies, they go into regulation, and they water down the regulations. They come back out. They get hired by the companies again. So I mean, you've got the same guys regulating these industries as the guys that are polluting are causing these disasters. What happened to the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico was, they just didn't put in all the safety systems that they were supposed to put in. There was only 2 safety valves when there should have been something like 20. Genetically modified organisms as well are seen as a biotech sort of solution, technology solution to world hunger. But according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, apparently one third of all food produced in the world, that's 1.3 billion tons, is wasted according to the Food and Agriculture report released 2 years ago. Hunger persists because of a dysfunctional profit system. It's more profitable for the likes of Dunn Stores, Tesco's and all that to just throw away bread, throw away food, rather than have somebody come along and use it. I mean, if they were giving away all their bread, the Waste Food Project is food, it will reduce the price of food. So in order to maintain a price for food and a profit, they would sooner waste food rather than feed people with it. So global warming, global warming and climate change, how they're linked, and the most concrete piece of information is the link between sea surface temperatures and the power of hurricanes. It's not that the number of hurricanes have increased, it's the fact that the power of the hurricanes has increased. It means that the hurricanes are there for longer, they dissipate a lot more energy, cause more flooding. And that's the most concrete connection between climate change and global warming and climate change. It's all to do with CO2 emissions. The International Energy Agency estimated in 2006 that emissions will more than double by 2050 from trends, which could result in a temperature rise of between 1.7 degrees Celsius and 13.3 degrees Celsius, according to these calculations. The problem with that is that if they reckon that if there's a 2% increase generally in world temperature, the role of the oceans in absorbing CO2 could be reversed, and the oceans could start emitting CO2, which could basically, that's a tipping point basically, where if we go there, we're going to have serious climate change problems. The ocean circulation system could collapse, shutting down the Gulf Stream basically, which keeps Northern Europe kind of warm. There has been a current that has moved south, a wind current that has moved south, and has resulted in a fodder crisis in Ireland for the last few years. Very little growth in the grass, very little growth in vegetables, and that sort of stuff. that will bounce north again for a while, but you know, it's good to point out that, like, you know, this climate change is definitely happening, and you can see it, you know, wherever you look. You know, if you're out in the land as I am. So yeah, if basically we could eliminate emissions in 2015, the effects of global warming, even if they last for 1,000 years, could be manageable, since temperature rises will peak at less than the widely accepted tipping point of 2 degrees. But you know, there's climate change deniers, and there's arguments out there that we can, you know, develop some geoengineering or some sort of technical fix for all this. And they looked at the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines in 1991. It sent huge amounts of sulfate particles into the stratosphere. The Earth cooled by a few tenths of a degree for several years. So they're seeing this as, well, sulfate particles, let's just, you know, pump them up there, and that'll, you know, stop the sun from heating up the planet, and that'll be the technical fix, and sure, we don't need to worry about climate change then. But you can't really depend on these technical fixes. There's even been talk about, like, leaving sulfate particles in jet fuel. Normally they're removed to make air travel more efficient, but you know, probably heard of chemtrails and that sort of stuff. People think it's some sort of poison that they're putting out there. It's not really. They're just doing tests to leave sulfate particles in jet fuel, so that would you know, have basically bounce off the atmosphere. The sun's rays bounce off the atmosphere, and that's been looked at. The climate deniers, the climate change deniers, you might have heard of ClimateGate, where there was a kind of a fudge in the maths. These climate change people, advocates, said that there was leaked emails and by the University of East Anglia in 2009 gave the skeptics a big boost. This is known as ClimateGate. There's also this fudge over rain-fed crop